This video is sponsored by Squarespace. One of the things I struggle with a lot is feeling like I have too many hobbies or interests. Too many things I want to do, yet never enough focus or time to do them all. And if you're watching this, I'm guessing you can at least somewhat relate to this feeling. So here's the deal. I'm going to tell you in detail what brought me to this tipping point, and then I'm going to show you the 3-step system I came up with for managing all of my interests and hobbies in a more meaningful and manageable way. And if at any point during this video you find yourself thinking, wow, do we really need to turn everything in our lives into a productivity system or a game or a 3-step system? Can't we just have fun for once? No. New and exciting games, miniatures, hobby products, paints are being released every single day at such a rapid rate that I no longer feel like I can keep up with it all. There are always more things that I would love to paint, play with, buy, review on the channel, but eventually I have to admit I can't do it all. I have to set some limits. And I think the thing that finally broke me, the thing that finally made me hit my limit on this, is the new big release from Games Workshop, Skaventide. You know, the latest big box from Games Workshop with all the new Skaven sculpts in it, the one with the new and exciting Spearhead game mode inside that everyone seems so excited about, just like everyone was with Combat Patrol a year ago, and then suddenly no one cares about Combat Patrol anymore. When this box was first announced, you might remember I was quite excited about it, and fully ready to paint a whole bunch of those new Rat Boys. I even did a whole video about it a few months ago where I explored what my Skaven paint scheme might look like. But the closer and closer it got to release day, the more I found myself asking, do I really need this $300 box of plastic and cardboard, this $300 commitment to a project I may never complete? I mean, sure, it would probably pay for itself in terms of the potential videos I could make with that box. That's at least 3 or 4 videos. And that new Spearhead game mode included in the box is supposed to be pretty fun. And heck, I even have a number of models I could use for Spearhead. I could paint up 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different Spearheads, maybe even 5 or 6. And I could paint a whole bunch of terrain for it. I can fill up some battle reports for it. I could go all in and commit my life to it. But wait, what about Kill Team? What about all of the indie games and other stuff I already own that I still haven't played or painted? The point is, we can't do everything. We can't paint everything. We can't play everything. We can't collect everything. And I know you know this. We've been through this before together. I just find it's really easy to forget in the middle of a new product cycle that we can't do everything. Because no matter how cool those new Skaven look, no matter how much fun the new Spearhead game mode is, any time or money that I choose to invest in Age of Sigmar, in Skaventide, would be time taken away from other projects. So here's what I did. Rather than trying to make responsible decisions like a regular adult, I decided to gamify this conundrum like I do with everything else in my life. I created a chart, a system, a hierarchy, if you will, of all of my different hobbies and interests that helps me to easily decide whether I can afford to spend my money and time on a new and exciting project or not. And maybe you might find this helpful, or maybe you might think I'm totally overthinking this problem. But statistically speaking, I think there's at least 1 in 100 of you who does want a system like this. I mean, you clicked on the video after all. So without further ado, let's get into the branch method of hobby management. Step 1, your main hobby. So this is a pretty simple system. You're either going to need a piece of paper and a pencil, or you can use like a mind mapping software. I recommend Draw.io. That's a nice free one if you rather work digitally. And our first step is going to be writing down our main hobby right in the middle of the piece of paper, right in the middle of the chart. This hobby or interest can be anything, but I'm going to recommend that this is your main time sink, the thing you would love to be devoting most of your time and energy towards that isn't survival needs or existing commitments. Your main hobby can of course change over time, so you're not making a huge commitment here. Just write down the first thing that comes to mind and you can always change it later. And this main hobby doesn't have to be super specific. It's actually good if it's a little bit vague, and you'll see why later. For me, this was extremely easy, and the first thing I thought of, miniatures games. Painting them, playing them, thinking about them, researching them. Basically anything related to little guys that you can paint and play with, that's my main hobby. You'll notice that this category that I picked is actually super broad. This could encompass anything from board games that use miniatures to RPGs that use miniatures, and of course war games, skirmish games, that sort of thing that use miniatures. But in a way, this category is also super specific. I didn't pick painting miniatures, I didn't pick miniatures, period. Because notably, I'm not really interested in painting miniatures for their own sake. I'm not really interested in making dioramas or painting busts. I specifically like to paint or craft tiny things that can be used in some sort of game. The limitations of this category also means that if something is a board game or an RPG that doesn't use miniatures, it's not within this category. Whatever's going on over there, that's none of my business. That is not part of my main hobby. Either of those could qualify as a side hobby. We'll get to those later. But I think it is super helpful to think about what your main hobby is, what your main area of interest is if you just had to pick one. Once you've narrowed it down, write it down on your chart, and this is going to give us a great starting point for our flowcharts. For me, I find it super helpful to have this area of focus written down, because whenever I want to buy something on impulse or commit to a new activity, I first try to ask myself, is this activity, is this product, is this whatever within my bubble of my main hobby? And if it is, that's great. Full steam ahead. If it's not, I might choose to add it as a side hobby. Of course, I'm not going to ask you to just do one thing for the next 30 days. Of course, you get to have side hobbies. Variety is the spice of life, and it's good to do new things from time to time. But before we get into the details of how I like to track my side hobbies and what the branch in the branch system means, I would first like to tell you about one of the other ways that I like to track and show off my various hobbies. That's right, it's this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Have you ever wanted to get online and surf the cerulean waves of cyberspace, but feel like it would be nice to have a home away from home, a nice beach house on the World Wide Web? You should check out Squarespace. It's the all-in-one website and hosting platform that makes it easy to get your website up and running with no coding or technical knowledge required. They've got a ton of beautiful templates to choose from, or you can build your own template by using their brand new feature, Squarespace Blueprint, which guides you through the whole process of building a website from scratch. I've been using my latest site, howlcorp.com, as a sort of chill-out room / storage locker at the edge of the data sea to house a gallery of my painted miniatures, all of my painting reference documents, as well as an online store, which has been super easy to put together, maintain, and accepts a variety of online payment options. The best part is, you can go to squarespace.com today for a free trial. Check out all the fun features, make a website, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/DanaHowl for 10% off your very first purchase of a website or domain. Part 2. Side hobbies. The core of this system is to have a main hobby, but nothing helps me enjoy my main hobby more than having one or two side hobbies at any given time. You can mark these down on your chart to either side of your main hobby. And for side hobbies, I tend to change these up pretty often. Like with everything else on this chart, I allow myself to change up my side hobbies once a month if I want to. Last month, my side hobbies were Lego and comic books. The month before that, it was comic books and Magic the Gathering. The month before that, it was video games and Magic the Gathering. This month, I haven't quite decided yet, but I think it's going to be my usual comic books as well as Magic the Gathering, because that super cute Bloomborough set is coming out this month, and I really feel tempted to buy some of those. The point is, I like to write these down to sort of make a physical commitment to them. As in general, about 1 main hobby and 2 side hobbies, I feel like is the maximum that I can commit to in any given month. Your results may vary, of course, but I feel like that's about the maximum that my budget and time can afford. For me, marking something down as a side hobby is a way of encouraging myself, like, yeah, you can spend a little bit of money on each of these things every month, a little bit of time on each of these things every month, but maybe not as much time as the main hobby. So let's say if you have a budget of $100 for your main hobby every month, maybe have a budget of $25 for each of your side hobbies every month, something like that. And similar for the time, energy, and maybe even physical space that you allow for these hobbies as well. Maybe you think this sounds silly, but for me, I find these sorts of limitations actually lead to greater creativity and greater happiness overall, especially with hobbies that are somewhat artistic in nature. But at the same time, these are not permanent limitations. Like with everything else on this chart, feel free to mix them up once a month. If you feel like you're getting more and more invested into your side hobby of gardening and less into your main hobby of musical composition, feel free to swap them between months. That is totally allowed and encouraged as well. Hobbies and interests can change and evolve over time. And for me, the utility of this system is just making sure they don't evolve and change too much, like every single day, to the point where I'm only making 1% progress at 10 different things, but making no real meaningful progress towards any one thing every month. You definitely don't need to be as rigid about this system as I am if you don't want to, but regardless, I think it's just a helpful exercise to think about these things before making any big commitments or purchases, especially when it comes to large sums of money and marketing that encourages impulse buying. And I'm saying this as someone who struggles with this a lot myself. So yes, 1 main hobby, 2 side hobbies, that's the basics of this system. However, if you do this for long enough, you might find that some of your hobbies might change, evolve, or even fuse together into a new hobby. For instance, last month I got back into Lego for a little bit. I didn't spend too much money on it. I just bought one little set, but I watched a lot of videos about it. I did a lot of research on it because that's what I'm prone to do. And in my research, I came across this idea that there's actually a Lego miniatures game out there. That's right, you can turn your Lego hobby into a miniatures game hobby. So by approaching it in a different way, we might find that Lego has now become a branch hobby of one of my main hobbies. Which brings us to part 3, branch hobbies. So remember before how I was saying that I like to keep my hobbies specific, but not too specific, so that it can encompass many things within a larger area of interest? Well, here's the reason for that. It's because for my main hobby, I like to let it grow like a tree, pruning it where necessary, but also letting it flower, adding what I like to call branch hobbies. Branch hobbies for me are a way of visualizing and managing my increasingly specific interests within a larger domain of interest. And just like the main system, each interest gets 1 main branch and 2 side branches. Here's how it works. I start by narrowing down the vague to the specific. So for example, with our main interest of miniatures games, I like to ask myself, what miniatures games am I interested in at the moment? The main kind I would say currently is skirmish games. That's the kind of game I most like to paint. It's the kind of game I most like to play, and it's the kind of game I find myself most obsessing over at the moment. So with that, let's add a main branch off of the miniatures games interest that says skirmish games. This gives us a more specific area to concentrate on if that's what we're looking for. Aside from this, I would say my 2 side interests within this domain are RPGs that use miniatures, like my current Ravenloft campaign, and solo games that use miniatures, like Rangers of Shadowdeep. So we can add those as side branches off of our main hobby. So what is this useful for? Well, when a box like Skaventide comes out and we feel tempted to purchase it, to pre-order it on impulse, we can say, does this fit into our main hobby? Yes it does. But it doesn't fall under any of our specific branch hobbies. AOS is an army game, not a skirmish game, not an RPG game, not a solo game, to my knowledge. So if we wanted to, we could remove one of our existing side branches and add a new one called Army Games, or specifically AOS. Like with everything in the system, it's totally cool to change these up once a month, so we totally could do that. But if I'm being totally honest with myself, upon reflection, I'm much more excited to play my current favorite skirmish game, Kill Team, work on my Ravenloft RPG game, or paint minis for Kill Team Acolyte, which is a Kill Team hack that's based also on Rangers of Shadowdeep. It's pretty cool, you should look it up. All of these things currently seem more interesting to me than Age of Sigmar. So yeah, this entire video has just been a way of explaining why I'm not buying Skaventide. I'm not going to make videos about it probably. Unless it goes on clearance like Dominion did, in that case I might buy it later down the line. But for the present moment, I am not currently interested in playing Age of Sigmar. Once again, the point here isn't to deny ourselves pleasure. If I really wanted to buy Skaventide in my heart, it does still fall under my main hobby. I could just swap around some branches to make it work. But the point is, I'm forcing myself to manually have to remove a branch before adding a new one. And I think that's a helpful practice to have to do. So yeah, that is the basic system that I've been using. You can add more and more branches to your tree if you want them to become increasingly specific. You could even do branches off of your side hobbies if you want. And as you do this, you might find that some of your increasingly specific branches might start to merge and weave themselves together. For example, I currently have 3 increasingly specific branches coming off of the Skirmish Tree branch that lists out the 3 games I'm currently most excited about. The main one being Kill Team, and the side ones being 2 games I'm kind of interested in and I want to explore a little bit this month. And because I'm ridiculous, I have even more branches coming off of my main game of interest, Kill Team. And one of those branches is Kill Team Acolyte, like I was talking about before, which is also a solo game. So the branches of my solo game stuff and my skirmish game stuff start to merge, and I can find a point where it's like, oh, both of these things I like, maybe I should focus around here right now. And a similar thing might happen over here as I realize that making terrain or painting miniatures for the new Corvus Belli game Warcrow might be useful for my D&D game. So you can see how these branches can weave and intersect in interesting ways. You can be as general or as specific as you want, and generally the further out these branches get, I'm mostly just using it as a brainstorming tool. What's really important to me are the core branches and maybe a few coming off of those, with the outer branches mostly being used to plan projects or potential trajectories I might want to explore in the future. So whether you choose to use this specific system or not, it's more this line of thinking that I would like you to try to explore, if you want to. Especially when it comes to spending your time and your money, as we only have so much of both of those things. I hope this video was useful to you, and if it was, let me know down in the comments. If you end up making a chart like this, definitely link it to me. I'm super curious to see what other people's charts look like. And as always, before we go, I would love to thank all of our wonderful patrons for helping keeping this channel running. I really appreciate it a lot. It makes a huge difference. If you'd like to see your name up here or gain access to any of our bonus features, such as our Patreon exclusive Discord server, you can do so over at patreon.com/DanaHowl. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.